In the first quarter of 2026, Nvidia absorbed an $8 billion inventory write-off and projected $15 billion in lost sales, all traced back to a single government decision made in a single city that is not Beijing. Jensen Huang flew to China personally. The ban was temporarily lifted, then tightened again under national security lobbying. Now Nvidia is building a third China-specific chip, currently reported to be in development and known as the Export Compliant Accelerator, purpose-built to thread the needle of policy thresholds. The bullish case says American export controls are working, cutting China off from the silicon that powers its artificial intelligence ambitions. The skeptical case says the only roadmap being rewritten belongs to Nvidia. 3 rounds decide which story holds, examining the policy's stated goal, its actual commercial damage, and the structural distortion it has introduced into Nvidia's product architecture. The argument for containment goes like this. Washington knew the downgraded accelerator it banned in April 2026 was not frontier hardware. Banning it anyway sent a signal that the United States is willing to absorb commercial pain to prevent even second-tier artificial intelligence hardware from reaching Chinese data centers. The logic is cumulative pressure. Deny enough compute across enough generations, slow the model training pipeline, preserve the gap. On paper, that is a coherent strategy. In practice, the chip that was banned was being used primarily for inference workloads, deploying models that Chinese labs had already trained rather than building new ones. Analysts covering Chinese cloud infrastructure have reported this pattern, though no public audit of actual workload distribution has been conducted. If inference hardware was the dominant use case, then cutting it off slows commercial deployment of existing capability, not the development of new capability. The ban addressed a bottleneck, but reports suggest it may not have been the critical one. Round 1 goes to the skeptics. The strategic logic rests on an assumption about where the choke point actually sits, and the available evidence does not cleanly support it. The commercial damage to Nvidia, by contrast, is documented to the dollar in its own public filings, which brings the analysis to the product line itself. The bullish argument here is that Nvidia is doing what American companies have always done, adapting. A China-specific product family is market segmentation. Maintaining a presence in the world's second-largest artificial intelligence hardware market without violating export controls is good engineering and good business. The third-generation compliance chip, if it ships and sells, would seem to validate that framing. The counterclaim is structural. No other geography in Nvidia's global footprint requires a dedicated compliance chip. Not Europe, not Japan, not Southeast Asia. The engineering resources allocated to designing, validating, and supporting a product whose specifications are effectively set by the Commerce Department's entity list are resources not going toward competitive roadmap advancement. 3 successive China-specific designs across roughly 3 years, from the downgraded training accelerator to the inference-focused successor to the current development stage chip, suggests the compliance target is moving faster than the engineering cycle. That is not segmentation. That is reactive product development, and the distinction matters. The internal cost of maintaining a parallel compliance organization is not publicly disclosed. The resource allocation argument is analyst inference, not a confirmed figure. That caveat is real. Round 2 goes to neither side cleanly, but the weight sits with the skeptics. A stable, 2-product strategy could be called segmentation. 3 redesigns in 3 years is something else. Now consider the lobbying cycle itself, because it is the least examined variable and possibly the most consequential. The bullish reading of Huang's Beijing trip and the temporary lifting of the ban is that the policy process is functioning as designed. Companies advocate, government listens, security reviewers update the calculus. The subsequent retightening shows the national security review is not captured by commercial interests. The system is responsive. What the cycle actually demonstrates, examined from the other direction, is that Nvidia's China revenue is now a variable determined by lobbying outcomes, rather than by product quality or market competition. A Chinese competitor operating domestically faces no such variable. Every quarter that Nvidia must model alternative scenarios around potential policy changes is a quarter where a domestic Chinese alternative, less capable today, but potentially less so in 3 years, operates with complete planning certainty. Certainty does not appear on a specification sheet. It does not show up in a benchmark, but it compounds. Huang's visit was publicly reported and confirmed. The sequence of ban, lift, and retighten is documented through official Commerce Department announcements and Nvidia's regulatory disclosures. The claim about domestic competitors gaining from planning certainty is analytical inference, not a measured advantage. The judge acknowledges this. Round 3 goes to the skeptics. Responsiveness is not the same as predictability. Nvidia is competing in China with one hand on its engineering roadmap and one eye on the Federal Register. That split attention has a cost that does not appear in any filing. Here is the decisive question, and it runs through the compliance chip that is currently in development. The bullish case for that chip is that it proves American semiconductor design remains world-class. Nvidia can engineer a product that satisfies export control parameters and still delivers enough performance to sell competitively. That capability, threading a compliance needle while remaining commercially useful, is itself a form of technological leadership. The skeptical case is that the chip proves something categorically different. The world's leading artificial intelligence chip company is allocating frontier engineering talent to the problem of satisfying a government threshold rather than maximizing performance. The design brief for this chip is not, build the best product for this workload. It is, build the most capable product that does not trigger a ban. Those are different mandates. One of them produces technological leadership. The other produces a compliance artifact that happens to be a semiconductor. Before closing that round, the dissent deserves its full hearing. The controls have unquestionably limited China's access to the most advanced training hardware, not the banned inference chip, but the higher capability chips restricted in earlier rounds. The cumulative effect of multiple restriction cycles applied over several years may be producing a capability gap that is not yet visible in public benchmarks, but is real inside Chinese research facilities. Nvidia's commercial pain could be the price of a strategy working on a longer timeline than a single earnings quarter. The compliance chip argument also cuts both ways. If a product designed under export control constraints can still sell at scale, that is evidence of adaptability, not distortion. The downgraded inference accelerator, before its ban, was selling at scale precisely because it was useful. One more complication sits here. If the current development stage chip ships and Chinese buyers choose it over domestic alternatives, that outcome would validate the claim that American hardware retains genuine pull even in a constrained market. These are not weak arguments. The judge does not dismiss them. The synthesis is this. The dissent's strongest point is the long timeline, and containment strategies should not be scored on a single quarter's write-off. But structural distortion and strategic effectiveness are not mutually exclusive. It is possible that export controls are slowing Chinese artificial intelligence development and simultaneously forcing Nvidia into a product architecture that serves neither its shareholders nor its engineering organization well. Both can be true at once. The verdict turns on which damage is recoverable. Round 4 goes to the skeptics, with a caveat. If the compliance chip ships, sells, and generates stable revenue without triggering another ban, the bullish case retroactively strengthens. The verdict here is provisional. The chip's existence is a symptom, and the outcome is not yet written. The ruling, the policy is doing something, but not cleanly what it claims, and not without measurable cost to the company it nominally protects. Nvidia's 3-chip China Odyssey is not a portrait of American resilience. It is a portrait of Washington functioning as a de facto product manager for the world's most consequential semiconductor company, issuing design briefs through policy announcements rather than market signals. The restriction that was supposed to settle the competitive question instead handed Nvidia an $8 billion write-off, a productized compliance problem, and a lobbying dependency that has no parallel in any other market it serves. China's domestic chip industry remains behind on the frontier. That much the bullish case gets right. But it is operating with a clarity of purpose that Nvidia, as of early 2026, does not have. The round that was supposed to close the fight gave the challenger an opening it did not earn through superior engineering. It arrived because the policy made it harder for Nvidia to do what it does best. The most consequential product decision in the artificial intelligence chip market this year was not made in Santa Clara. It was made in Washington, and Nvidia is engineering around it. Here is the round this verdict could be wrong on. If the compliance chip ships, performs competitively, and sells without triggering another restriction, does the structural distortion argument collapse? Or does it simply move to the next design cycle? Leave your score in the comments and tell us whether you think a third redesign in 3 years is adaptation or capitulation. If you think the export control debate is missing its real story, subscribe and turn on notifications. The next round is already in motion.